Hello, my name is Nick Manzo. I gotta ask, how many people are following Major League Baseball right now? Only a couple. So for you, Brad, let's go Mets. With that being said, sorry, I had to. With that being said, we've talked a lot about GDSN. We've talked a lot about a great overview from two suppliers and a provider, and Margot, a fantastic job on how the provider's using the data. I want to show a visual of an example set, at least from a One WorldSync perspective, of how all this operates, because the title of the session is around UDI, but we're talking a lot about, to be quite frank, what UDI has created beyond just the compliance piece. And what UDI has truly created is a change in the way organizations are looking at data management within their companies. And that has to be considered and truly understood, and I'll talk about some anecdotes, but the concept around GDSN is the movement of product information from one place to the next, the continuous information, and the movement of that information over time, right? So you're creating a relationship between Braun and the university, and they're communicating on a consistent basis. It's an automated process, and they can provide information back and forth. From a GDSN perspective into the FDA, as an example set for UDI, we are, from One WorldSync standpoint, we are supporting the delivery of that same data into the FDA's required format. And we think we've been, the GDSN as a process to help deliver the data has been very successful. I think as of today, I tried to get the numbers this week, there's around 100,000 UDIs in the GUDID. We, One WorldSync, are providing around 30,000 of those items. So about 30% of the GUDID data is coming from organizations that are leveraging a GDSN concept. I talked about this yesterday, and again, really appreciate the opportunity to discuss that, which is the growth of this process. And the whole goal is one to many and many to one. How do you leverage as much efficiency as you possibly can within your organization in this growing need for more information? And I'll bring up an anecdote or a statement that we like to use. It doesn't necessarily apply to this segment yet. I think it will apply in a couple of years. But it's this concept that your grandmother bought availability, your mother brought brands, and your daughter will buy attributes. The reality is more and more concepts in the way in which organizations are talking to each other are focused around the availability of additional assets, attributes, to move forward with strategic planning and strategic initiatives. Dr. Reißmann talked about that internally in his organization. Margot showed it in that execution around with Mercy. But it goes even beyond that, because it also talks about how are you even, for an example set, if you're a medical device manufacturer or a manufacturer in general, how are you supporting your sales staff? You're creating all this new data. You're delivering it to a regulatory database. That database in the FDA is a website that people can download that information. It is an e-commerce site. No matter how you want to define e-commerce, it is the availability of information on a website, right? People are downloading it. You want to make sure that that information is consistent across all the places in which that information is reflected and delivered within your supply chain. And the growth of this process is to enable that on a consistent basis. And as I mentioned yesterday, we saw this hockey stick, and we expect this to continually grow. In fact, the growth that we've had over the past, I think, year is we're seeing almost 1 million new GTINs being loaded into the environment almost on a calendar year. So if you keep that going, and especially with the Class 2 requirements coming up in September of next year, that's going to grow probably by about 2 million. We talked about a high-level overview. I mean, I think everyone knows why UDI is important, but we always wanted to reemphasize this, is that it's all about providing information to reduce all of these consistent processes that have been struggling to help the healthcare supply chain grow on a more effective basis. Patient safety, improved product recall, implementation of global medical device system. I'll give you another anecdote. Last year, I was at a conference in the United States focused on hospital professionals, so material master individuals, people who run MMIS systems, all those other facets. There were 3 sessions on how Walmart is entering the healthcare supply chain. You know what Walmart does very, very well? Is their supply chain and collect data. And that's going to be a big challenge as the healthcare supply chain moves forward with the reality that other institutions like Walgreens, CVS, speaking specifically from a US perspective, my apologies, but they start expanding beyond their normal brick and mortar establishments of their supply chain. And it's only going to grow. And we talked about the expansion of these, all these other UDI databases and the utilization of a one-to-many pipe. And again, we talked about yesterday, I don't want to go into too much overview of this, but again, over 1 million items today focused in on information associated to the medical sector, the healthcare segment. But I want to emphasize another point that sometimes gets lost. Hospitals don't just buy medical device. Hospitals buy pharmaceutical products. They buy janitorial and sanitary products. They buy food. Right? The opportunity for this process is not just the medical device segment, but it expands beyond that. It expands beyond the ability to give them the opportunity to get everything that supports the maintenance and management of the hospital on a continuous basis. Talked about this yesterday. I know some of these slides are repeat, so I apologize, but there are commercial organizations that want data. They want more data. And as MJ talked about it, they are not looking at the current set, and they're not looking at it and saying, you know, status quo is fantastic, give me 37 attributes and I'm going to be happy. Because there's someone in that organization who looks at their master data and goes, I've got 70% of my environment that maybe is giving me 80 attributes and 30% that's only giving me 30. Well, guess what? Now I want 100, and I want everyone to give me 100. So they're coming back and asking for more information. So it's important to contemplate what this means internally. This was a hopefully, Christoph, you're okay with the image? But it's a FileRad product, but it's a focus on the contemplation of the visualization of where this is all going, right? So you think about, in order to support UDI right now, it's a concept around master data. But as I talked about yesterday, and I'm reemphasizing today, it's not just that, right? This is an organizational effort because you need supply chain information. You need packaging information, marketing information, sales data, regulatory, R&D, and consumer affairs. It's a corporate strategy. You have to change your mindset around this, both as a manufacturer, as a provider, as a solution provider, and as an MO. It has to be an idea that when what UDI has created is a larger scale opportunity to put product data management strategies within organizations who so far have kind of pushed that as, that's something that marketing does or sales does or someone else does. This is core to the existence of moving forward in now what is being a more virtual world. E-com. So what we always try to emphasize with organizations is seize the opportunity, data demand is increasing, are you prepared? Treat the care of your product data the same way this is a great statement. I was recently at a manufacturer, and this was, we did a 5-day Kaizen event. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's basically a Japanese conceptualized strategy meeting where for 5 days you talk about how this major change is affecting the organization in multiple areas and ways. And what came out of it was this great statement that one of the individuals said was, we, as a supplier, need to treat the care of our product data the same way we treat the creation of our product. Too long it has been regulated as, again, it's just data, just get it out, don't worry about it. We're going to spend all this time and energy on the product, the building, the R&D, the development of the product. But as far as the data concerned, someone else can take care of that. They realized that they needed to treat the care of the product the same way they treat the creation of that product itself. One of the things we always try to say, and we try to emphasize as well as all this, is that regardless of whether you're a supplier, you're a provider, you're an MO, you're a solution provider, it always is around try to take control, try to understand the situation, take control in your organization before you lose the control. As I mentioned, this data is flowing out there. Another little anecdote, I was at a medical device manufacturer recently, and it was a big room, and multiple entities, multiple stakeholders. There was an executive VP of supply chain. And in the room, and we're talking about how are we going to execute this strategy, how can we help them execute the strategy, what do they want to accomplish. And the statement he made to me as I was presenting was, I'm not really worried about it because we control the data. And I basically said, no, you don't. You've lost control of that data. He goes, well, I don't believe you. So we went on break, and I came back, and I had the GUD ID up with their product data searchable within 3 clicks. And the standard internet search criteria is if you can't get to someone in 3 clicks, you got to redo the process. And in 3 clicks, I was able to get to their product data and download all of it. That changed his mind. I did not realize this. Maybe we did lose control. Now, how do we start fixing this problem? Another little anecdote, another medical device manufacturer, this time I was privileged enough to be in Tokyo 2 weeks ago at a presentation we were doing. And sitting in a room, it was about utilizing GDSN to support UDI requirements. And it was all the QA people. And the QA people were sitting in the room, and it took them a year to gather all the data that they need for Class 2. They had started last October. It's October, yes. Sorry, last October. They collaborated all the data, and now they're figuring, how do we get this into the GUDID fast? And what we started talking about, this is an opportunity to get this to GUDID, but have you thought about all these other ways that this process could support? And they all sat there and they all agreed, we didn't even know this existed. And the next step was, we need to get our executive VP of sales aware, because this data is available beyond our normal process of delivering Excels. We have to be aware, cognizant, and in control of this process. So again, anything to emphasize around this is focusing on the realization that UDI predominantly was a starting point in a brand new journey for most organizations. Creates the ability for new pieces of data in some type of automated or more consistent way that is going to drive the need for companies, regardless of who you are, to rethink your master data management and your product data management strategies as you go forward. The last thing I wanted to talk about, as MJ mentioned, is this thing called MR3, or Major Release 3. I gotta ask, show hands, how many people are aware of what Major Release 3 is? Okay, so about 30%. So for the rest, the 70%. Major Release 3, the GDSN goes through constant changes. It's a living, breathing environment, this process. There's minor releases on a consistent basis, and every so often, there is what's called a major release. The last one was, what, 7 years ago, 2005, so 10 years ago. The GDSN was started predominantly in the retail supply chain. So when you think about that from the perspective of utilizing it and how other organizations and other categories of manufacturers are utilizing it today, it's focused on the way retailers kind of look at data and the structure of that. What the GDSN realized was we had to make this non-exclusive to just the retail, but expand it beyond. There's other categories of product manufacturers have to be able to attract, to provide standards, process engagement to. And that's what Major Release 3 is the ability for the GDSN to be utilized within multiple categories of manufacturers. Medical device, making it easier for you to load the information, not having to basically trick the system with a lot of 0.00001 data entry points for those that have done it. Helps for equipment manufacturers, non-standardized manufacturers that are just looking at, I'm selling in each. Not everyone sells in each. People sell other types of product. So that's the predominant aspect behind what Major Release 3, it's creating a brand new opportunity to reach new categories, new industries, to drive GDSN and GS1 standards around the world. And that's it. We've got a bunch of information from GS1 Global that you can read on that. And I think we're at the end. Again, let's go Mets.
Any questions? Don't be shy now. While we think of your questions, I have a couple questions. Maybe one for Volker, maybe MJ. When a new target market asks for data via the GDSN, how big of a challenge is that? And on average, how long would you say that takes? A new country comes on board and says, hey, I want data via the GDSN from you.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe I start. Yeah, okay. So if let's say if the IT infrastructure is in place to connect GDSN, that's a thing what we have to do one times. So a special team is doing that, and if a new target market comes, we have to set up some new information provider, GLN stuff like this. So that's something what is really work what a global IT team is doing, that's quite quick. The real challenge starts with the data the local market is looking for and the products which are in scope. So what we have done within Braun is we have developed our internal GDSN implementation guideline. So we have a guideline which exactly describes how we set up such a project, who has to take which role, stuff like this. And with that, we try to set up a new target market within 3 months. But it's really dependent on the products in scope and the data behind it. And let's say the challenge is always if the market, the target market, is looking for data which we do not need for our internal processes. So all the data we need for our internal processes, I would say, are quite good and in a complete and in a good quality. Otherwise, our internal processes would fail. But if a target market is looking for something what we do not need internally, then you always have to figure out who is responsible to maintain this data. You have to create awareness on the local side. So you have to involve people and you have to explain why it's important to collect this data, and they have to do it. And to collect data is not a sexy thing. It creates really work and headache. And that's why I would say 3 months is something what we want to achieve, but it depends on the products in scope and the data which are required.
Yeah, I concur. It's often about the request of the data. Our process is we have some onboarding assessment tools. It's everything from what do you think you want, well, you know, what's your GLN, what kind of process are you looking for? Are you wanting to do machine to machine? So we go through an assessment period with someone coming on board like that. But to Volker's point, if they're requesting data that doesn't already exist, it's as I said, it's not. Yeah, you're right. It's not sexy. It's the ability to dig for that, if you will. And once again, it's not one and done. Just because you found it does not mean that it's owned and maintained and has some quality in there. So I think between 60 and 90 days is probably roughly where we fall with that as well.
Maybe I can add something. For example, if a target market is looking for data for medical devices. So, you know, if you take a look to the medical devices and the diversity across the medical devices, and then it's required to, let's say, provide logistic data, packaging hierarchies, dimensions, weights, all the stuff which we have. But we do not have it for all of our products. For some products, really, we do not need it internally. We do not need to know the size of very tiny items. We need it maybe on the sales unit level, on a stock keeping level. That's pretty clear. But what we are discussing with our partners is really, for what do you need it? What's the business purpose for the data on the different packaging levels? What is really required and what's not? Just to say, give me everything and we will see what we do with it, that's not the right way. We need to really identify the business purpose behind it.
Thank you. Any other comments from the panel on that? Any questions or comments from the audience? Back. Sorry. Let's squeeze through here.
I would like to add one comment and underline this comment very clearly. After, as you explain, we have changed our processes to manage the master data, the next level is what Volker explained, is really quality. So that means if we have the right quality for all the participants in place, but it needs before to change the processes currently and dramatically. So that means one ownership, one responsibility, for example, in global companies. And what I learned was it is coming up. So that means the understanding of the right master data is in our mind. What we have to do is to deploy it.
Thank you.
No, it's a great point. And one of the things I think, how many of you here are familiar with EDI? I think everyone, right? Where was EDI, 20, 30 years ago? Right? When it just started out, it was with very big companies that were able to do it, and it was a side job from an IT individual. Someone said, hey, let's go do EDI, and it obviously went to IS, IT, side job. But 20 years later, EDI departments popped up. I think you hit on something which, and I think Volker and MJ are reiterating it, is the reality is that organizations have to start thinking about preparing that this is not a side project or a side job. This is a new way of doing business. And the reality is that requires resources, planning, budget, just contemplation at a strategic level of how you manage this. And that potentially, and what we are seeing, I don't know if Margot can see this as well, but from a One WorldSync perspective, we are now seeing GDSN and GS1 pop up in titles of individuals, right? And that's very important. We see that as a fundamental shift in the landscape of the realization that there has to be an organized way of how we manage this going forward.
Yeah, Nick, that was kind of a segue as to what I was thinking about saying. You, I think, articulated well when you talked about the kinds of people that you bring into the discussion. And I hope I can voice this. Sometimes what happens, we go to big shots, and that's where it gets screwed up. Being a big shot, I screw up. It's the people who actually do the work that know the work, and I think we many times miss that golden opportunity when we talk about attributes and what you want and all these kinds of things. No offense, but it's the little guys who know what's going on. The big shots screw it up. So I think it's important to pull those people in. Maybe we can get rid of some of these redundancies. The requests for attributes that nobody has or nobody knows or nobody can use. Like we've all said, everybody has to be involved. Thanks.
Again, I want to add another piece. It's one of the things to that organizational piece is all of a sudden the contemplation or the idea around talent acquisition and talent maintenance and retainment of talent. And yeah, I know that GDSN is not sexy in any way, shape, or form.
What?
It is probably one of the most dry topics you can possibly have a conversation around. It's tons of, I know, but I'm sorry, it's the reality. It is a lot of acronyms. It is a lot of process. But when you start contemplating what that provides, the opportunity it creates, because I guarantee you, there is some 20-year-old or probably younger individual, girl or boy, somewhere in San Francisco that now has access to the GUDID and is building some type of mobile app or some type of app that is going to connect to that database via an API and is going to have all that data on demand immediately to everyone around the world and is going to score products somehow. It's happening. If it hasn't already happened, I'm hoping it's my daughter when she grows up so I can retire. But the reality is that is happening. And you have to take this as an opportunity, if I can, again, unfortunately have any type of ask, is take this as an opportunity to bring in those individuals that are on the front lines, trying to help manage this, get their opinions, because it truly does matter, and they bring an enormous amount of enlightenment to the organization. And I think you'll find individuals as well that may have been hidden that have opportunities to shine because they're younger sometimes, and they have new ideas about where the world is going. And that's the reality. It's no longer, as I mentioned yesterday, a paper and Excel world. It is a digital world, and you have to be prepared for it.
Thank you, Nick. Any other comments, questions? I kind of want to follow up on something Bill said, and this is for maybe all of you. Can you talk a little bit about the awareness, the importance of product information, let's just call it product information, at an executive level? As you, either Dr. Reißmann at a hospital, Margot and Nick, as you talk with customers, Volker and MJ, even within your organizations, if you can, how would you characterize the level of awareness of the importance of product information at the executive level?
That awareness is, the level of awareness is low to start with. It has increased in our hospital drastically because we're in the middle of a project of barcoding, or identifying products at the point of care and joining them with the patient data. And this project has been massively delayed due to lack of availability of master data. That's why I personally find pools really sexy.
They are. Absolutely are.
Yeah.
We are going to make them sexy.
Even sexier. Wow. I mean, my boss is aware of the importance of master data, because I had to explain to him like 3 to 5 times over the course of a year or more why our project is so delayed. And he understands quite well. So he has been a clinically active physician himself, and the director of a clinical unit before becoming CEO, and so he knows what we're talking about.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments? No?
Yeah, I would say my observation is the same. At the C-suite, the awareness of the importance of master data is relatively low, but I think we're seeing that begin to increase. And one of the hooks there, unfortunately, is regulatory compliance rather than patient safety. So the more of these countries that come online with these requirements around regulatory compliance and publishing data and having that available, I think that's going to get their attention, and then hopefully they can be educated about the benefits from a patient safety and a cost improvement perspective as well as we go forward.
I was going to mention I started with J&J in January, and I think that's a testament to where Johnson & Johnson is from a global or an enterprise level. Is it really sort of just fell in different hands. I mean, customers wanted data, and sort of somebody made it happen. The fact that there is a team growing and building this out and starting to look at it from a strategic perspective, I think is probably a complement of understanding what big data, analytics, whatever you want to call it, they are becoming digital assets for which all the organizations that share it have to be accountable and raise that quality.
Just to expand on that, big data has been a big buzzword also in our country, in Germany. And to my understanding, big data is just a big amorphous cloud of whatever, sort of an amorphous lump, if it is not somehow filled with meaning. And meaning comes through master data terminology, linking the meaning, the semantics of what's in there. And so big data and master data are not sort of different worlds. They are, to my opinion, intricately intertwined. One doesn't, big data doesn't work, for my understanding, without good master data and good semantics. Anybody in the room that has experience with big data and whether it might work without master data and semantics? Okay, thank you.
I was just going to, I suppose, reinforce support for what's being said. In my experience from Australia, dealing with hospital executives and I suppose being on the receiving end of a screaming hospital executive on more than one occasion in nursing directors, you never get a meeting around master data management. If you go to a hospital executive and say, I want to talk to you about master data management, they'll, narcolepsy sort of kicks in real fast. But if you talk to them in terms of we can help get off of your risk register stock outs and stock availability, every hospital executive I've experienced, it's on the risk register in terms of product issues on wards, and that's normally an area that gets strong attention. The other, from a master data perspective, has been product information, because both areas are normally significantly lacking in hospitals, and there's just not that availability of the information flowing around, and you've got people chasing the same information throughout the whole system. So I just wanted to reinforce support. Excellent.
Maybe a question for manufacturers or even the hospital. The question is, what data next? With the US FDA, it became a big push to get that FDA data. For years, we struggled with getting just the hospital elements, and it took healthcare, a bit of time to get to those 30-some attributes and collect data. And then the US FDA came on with more data. So the question really is what our organization is doing to understand what data next, because as every target market comes on, every area or country will have a UDI with their attributes. And the challenge I have, trying to work internally with the dates, I wish we could staff 90 days to the next target market. It's much longer where I come from. But how do we understand which data next? Because our people, the people in the trenches, the little people that need to get the data, want to do that once. They don't want to do it this year for Argentina, this year for China, next year for Germany. They want to do it once. So the question is, what is all the data? Can we create a master project, and where do we go from here?
One approach to an answer might be to look at a classification system that is gaining momentum and gaining weight in Europe, starting out from Germany, that is EClass. And EClass, in its newer versions, is on the one hand a classification, and on the other hand defines in which corner of the product landscape you would expect which attributes. For example, color would not be an important attribute for a coronary stent, while length and diameter and coating with a drug, of course, is mandatory for a coronary stent. So probably looking at EClass and the probably attributes is a good English translation, would be probably a good first shot. I don't know, there's people in the room that are aware of EClass, and they might comment on that, whether that would be a good first orientation. Nobody? Cowards.
Not specifically on E-Class, but the whole thing with classification systems is, for a manufacturer's point of view, is a bit of a pain in the behind. There are so many different classification systems, and from a global perspective, one market, such as Germany with E-Class, we have to have the E-Class codes in the system for Germany. We have a different E-Class in the UK for the NHS that we also have to populate, and they're different. They're not the same system. We have UNSPC codes, we have GMD, and I know that's a nomenclature rather than a classification system, but again, it's another one. And all the time, we're getting more requests through to add more and more classification system codes into the systems, and there's no way that we can carry on handling that sort of information. There needs to be something that just puts one or maybe two at the most global classification systems in place.
I very much agree with you. So why don't, I don't know, whoever start an initiative to harmonize those classifications?
It's something that has been raised within industry. I mean, Volker, we've spoken about classification codes within the UCAMED UDisc working group, and where do you start? And it's how do you say which one is the best one to go with, because they've all got different properties that are good, and you need something that's going to combine the best parts of them.
Yeah, I agree, and I would like to come back to another point to accelerate, let's say, to provide data to different target markets. I think we need to talk about standardization here, and in terms of standardization, I think about the list of data elements for different use cases, and I think the work we did in the past to predefine use cases and the attributes which we need to support this use case, that's something what is really important and will help us to accelerate. And maybe it's better to start with a 85% solution soon than to wait for the 100% solution and start in a few years. So this set of data attributes which we have defined for certain use cases will help us to accelerate the implementation of UDI and to provide data to our partners. And we see our customers, or NITA, for example, as our partners, and we want to send them the data because we know they need it to improve their processes. And as I said, from our point of view, data and data quality and master data provide to our partners has the same importance than the good product quality itself. And it's a kind of a change of our mindset also in our company, and that will help that we really create internally the awareness to maintain data which we don't need for our internal processes. But that's nothing what you can say, hey, we want to have it and everybody will do it. Even our CEO will do it, will mandate this. That will not happen from one day to another. That's a process to implement it, and but I believe we are on a good way, and we are working in the right direction, but let us start and not just talk about it.
Just a short remark to expand on that. You can bet that the availability of master data and the quality of master data are going to be topics when a customer evaluates a supplier. It is going to be a component of the evaluation, and it is going to be entered into tenders. A lot of hospitals in Germany and GPOs include availability of EClass and availability of idents like GTINs is going to be the next step that is going to be either required or a major sort of evaluation point in tenders.
Another comment from Jenny?
Just sort of generally about the attributes that are being requested. I mean, I tend to have 2-3 spreadsheets maybe a week landing on my desk from different markets and different customers asking for information. And a couple of the ones that I'm working very closely with at the moment is Kaiser Permanente in the US. And their attribute list, well, when you're looking at healthcare items specifically, there's 90 attributes that they're asking for in total. Of them, there's 23 mandatory, 61 are required, and then the last 6 are really optional. So, I mean, it depends on your product type, obviously, how many you're going to have to put in there. But that's a lot of information, and you would think, okay, can we question it? Can we say, do you really need this? Are you going to use this piece of information? The other one is the NHS. Now, there's 119 attributes being requested by the NHS. 25 of those are pricing attributes, and 7 of them will be default pricing attributes, so they'll only have to go in once. The remaining ones, there's another 94, and of that 94, 13 of those will be default attributes. Now, I can say personally that I was on the working group with the Department of Health when we looked at the attributes, and we spent a long time working with the NHS and questioning every single attribute that they put forward to us. There was getting on for 1,000 to begin with that we started looking at, and we actually did remove a lot. We were able to say to them, okay, do you use this piece of information? Well, it's in our system. Yes, but that's not what we're saying. Are you using it for anything? And when they said no, then we decided to remove it. The whole thing was a process that was worthwhile going through. We still are at 119 attributes, but that information is used by them. And so it's definitely got to be there. But it is worth questioning because, again, attributes are different. I mean, if we say there's 90 for Kaiser, they're not the same ones that are required by the NHS.
Can I to add to that? I think you brought up a very valuable point, is that you and your team who understand the requirement or the energy and effort to collect the data spoke directly with the organization and team that was looking to capture the data. And what we've seen is that sometimes you don't have the opportunity, or the opportunity isn't pushed to put those two teams together, and it's through other individuals that the messages are relayed. And when that happens, number one, stuff gets lost in translation, but 2, you can't get to the reality or the realization of what are you trying to accomplish. Everything we are doing is about solving some type of business opportunity and or need. And there's ways to do it collaboratively, and it shouldn't be all based upon technology. Technology helps, but the way we look at it is technology is 30% of the equation. 70% of the equation is the realization that there's a relationship there, and the relationship is based upon business engagement. And you have to understand what those requirements are in order to support it. Because what I've seen, again, speaking for myself, is that the establishment of those relationships actually helps out the partnership going forward, because you break down new walls, create new opportunities for strategic engagement, and it's not just focused on, here's a letter, go comply with this, or I'm going to stop doing business with you. It creates another opportunity for engagement. That's why, at least my message has consistently been, there's so much more opportunity that comes from building out a structured way of looking at this data and leveraging it not just from the delivery of it, but the relationships and the strategic conversations that it can bring.
This is the most important topic, I think, for GDSN right now, is what I call the attribute rodeo. And if we continue to proliferate and come out with more and more data attributes, I think GDSN will fail. I think it's going to require that we collectively get a small set of data attributes and really begin to use it. And I think that's probably the most important thing that we can do if we really want to see this succeed, is to get a small set of attributes that virtually every manufacturer can come up with and that every healthcare provider can use. And if we're all collectively focused on the same set of attributes, I'm convinced we can succeed. And it just concerns me when I hear, you know, this hospital with 100, the next one with 100 more. I think we're doomed. I don't think there's any manufacturer that can have thousands of attributes for every item they make. A manufacturer might make 20,000 items, they might have 100,000 items, and you do the math and you look at what is required to come up with all that data each time something is added. I don't see any way out of it. I think this is probably the most important thing we can do, is collectively focus on trimming down the number of attributes and implementing.
Peter, excuse me, if you allow me a remark on that.
Sure.
I don't know whether I'm happy with that statement, because it says if you have any demands beyond the, I'd say, the minimum that you just defined, the core set, then you're out. Which is nothing I could live with well. I can live well with what Volker Zeinar said, that collaboratively, in the sense of Nick Manzo, you sit together and you. Is it failing? No. Okay. Collaboratively, you sit together and sort of go through use cases. And I bet you there are use cases that are not covered by your core set. And then you may have to swallow that additional data have to be added to the core set for certain use cases in certain product segments. I'm sure it's going to be specific to segments, and actually that's the philosophy behind EClass, because their attributes are segment specific, as I already elaborated. So this general idea of, on the one hand, collaboratively developing the need, defining the need, and on the other hand, not requiring color for coronary stents would be the way to go. Limiting everything to a single core set is not the way to go, certainly not.
So, Dennis, I agree. I think I keep on, hopefully, there's an emphasis around collaboration. There has to be a level of collaboration and conversation between you and your partner and the industry to industry, right? So recipients to suppliers, you and your partners requesting it. The crux that you're going to face, and this is the argument that we've seen get challenged, where you get really back in the corner, is the first thing they'll go is, so I went on your website and I saw a lot of data. Yeah, I want all that, right? Because it's there. So you got to have that someplace, and I want all that, and I'd like it in an automated way. And I'm not saying that as a perspective to say that the conversation can't happen. I'm saying it in the perspective of, there's a consistent way, or the delivery of pamphlets, the delivery of other information to support the sales engagement. And that's why the emphasis is always on, it's a collaborative conversation between you and your customer or you and your partner, but it's also a collaborative conversation that we try to make sure that companies are having internally. Because if you're not aligned sometimes with the commercial organization or other pieces, they're delivering other pieces of information to close the deal. And then then that recipient gets that data, and now they're going, well, how do I want that as well. Why can't you give me this? You gave it to me when you sold me the product, but now I can't get it on a consistent basis. And it's a hard problem to face. But it creates, I look at this as opportunity. It's an opportunity to support and look internally about how either IS, IT, regulatory, QA can support marketing, sales, commercial, and how all of those other entities can support your responsibilities as well, because it has to be together. When it's not, that's when we see it not really work.
I'm happy to go on. We're about 5 minutes over. So I'm just going to suggest that I want to make a couple comments, if it's okay, unless there are more or other comments the panel wants to make. So a couple of things. On classification, there's a paper we produced earlier this year. There are over 20 active classification systems used in healthcare all over the world. Technically, it is possible to map them. It is highly impractical, and it is possible to actually use a system that would map all the others, because each classification system has a specific need or purpose. For instance, ATC in atomic therapeutic classification has a certain purpose. UNSPSC has a certain purpose. So there are nomenclatures, as Jenny said as well, which have all totally different purpose than classification. They're not the same thing. There's a paper on our website. If you go to justone.org, go to the healthcare section and look under data management. There's a paper there that we published in May, and it's on LinkedIn too, so you can find it both ways. Going back to the comment about attributes, Volker mentioned it. About 5 years ago, we started to look at this issue of attributes. And there are 10 specific use cases that have been developed for healthcare. And if you look at them, they really answer the question, why do hospitals need data? And the important discussion to have, I agree with a few things that Nick said, is that the discussion is extremely important. And I think the most important discussion you can have about attributes is, why is the data needed? Once we agree that, if Dr. Reißmann is talking about procurement, then we can have a meaningful conversation about that small set of attributes that he needs for procurement. If we're talking about medicine dispensing or a pharmacy, this is a total different discussion. We can have that discussion too. One anecdotal piece of information, there's about 1,500 attributes in GDSN today. A typical grocery store where this whole thing started, uses between 4,000 and 5,000 attributes. A lot of those aren't in the GDSN. I don't know if there's anything you can do to limit the need for data. I think it's going to continue to increase. The fundamental thing that I would urge all of you to do is really start to look at everything that the panel has said about putting data management in practice, data governance and procedures, because it is going to get even more challenging. The last thing is a major release. We're out of time, but I would urge you to take a look at this website. This is significant. If you are involved in GDSN and you have not heard of the major release, call your data pool immediately, because there's a lot of work you need to do. And so I'm going to apologize for the fact that the session ran over, but I'm really, really happy that there was a passionate discussion around this. So thank you so much.